When I first joined, it was all Aortos at that point because Naas was interested in taking Aortos live, and I'm sure some people know, but Nox Corvus, currently of Akhlys, he played guitar on the Aortos Gods Without Name album. So when I first joined, it was those two guys. So, original Nightbringer founding members, and then my bass player who I've known for almost 15 years at that point. And so my first kind of task was to learn that style, and Menthor is the drummer of that. So this is some intense shit. And I credit Menthor as my indirect most important drum teacher of my entire playing, because I'm learning his stuff, and this is the next level for me.
Greetings, Legion, and welcome to episode 262 of Into the Necrosphere. Last week, I spoke to Naas Alcameth about the fantastic Akhlys album, House of the Black Geminus. This week, we welcome to the podcast for the first time ever, Akhlys' drummer, Eoghan, and he and I spoke all about his musical background, how he went from being a guitarist to a bassist to eventually picking up the drums, meeting Naas for the first time, joining the band, and how his unique musical perspective adds to the creative furnace of one of the very best black metal bands on the face of the earth. That is going to be coming your way very shortly, but before we get to that, I promised you last week that I was going to play you my other favorite EP of 2024. No surprise to anybody, the band in question, or the band responsible, was Eoghan's Hammer out of Norway, and this is a song called Monoscent. Keeping the black flames of true Norwegian black metal alive, that was Engangshammer with a song called Monosint. It is taken from their split EP with Liktern. The EP is called Kolde Pest en Dot / Ed Morkere Stead. It came out on Falter Records, and of course we did a premiere on the Sphere on this very show, a band that features none other than Swartalv of Nocturnal Breed and Gehenna. There is talk that perhaps they are going to be doing more than just that EP. I'm going to get Swartalv on the podcast to reveal more, if of course there is anything to reveal. But in the meantime, do make sure that you check out that EP if you haven't done already. Absolutely fantastic stuff. And again, regardless of what he's up to musically, Swartalv is going to be back on the show for a news rant in the not too distant future. My friends, you should be aware by now that I am a very proud member of the Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse, an elite unit of men dedicated to filling your week from Monday to Sunday with the very highest quality entertainment. We kick off on a Monday with Brandon Legion and Horrorwolf 666. Yours truly casts hexes and slays poses every Tuesday on Into the Necrosphere. Next week, I'm going to be talking to John Jarvis of Scour. Many of the Legion have been shouting from the rooftops the praises of the new Scour record Gold. I caught John probably towards the end of the day, so he was a little weary when we spoke, but around about the half-hour mark, he definitely sprang into life, and we had a really great conversation about that album and about Scour and about all of his other musical endeavors, so that's coming your way next week. On a Wednesday, we've got Sensei Mike Hill coming your way with another dose of Everything Went Black. It's also a double shot because later in the day, you get to enjoy the dulcet tones of the Middle Eastern marauder Cheyenne of the band Trivax and his podcast Iblis Manifestations. On a Thursday, Sensei Mike Hill returns. He is joined either by his co-host Outlaw Mike Scondado or the Professor Jeff Kashid for one of my favorite podcasts of the week, Necromaniacs. And then on a Thursday as well, and again on a Sunday, you get the Sinister Minister, the Reverend Carl Haikara, bringing you his podcast, Soul Knox. In a couple of weeks' time, the Reverend and I are going to be doing a deep dive into the My Dying Bride discography. We took that sucker from top to bottom, went through our favorite tracks, went through our not-so-favorite tracks, discussed at length our thought on the current situation within My Dying Bride, vis-a-vis their vocalist, and much, much more. It's about a 2-hour epic conversation, and it is going to be coming your way, as I said, in a couple of weeks' time, so keep an eye out for that. Also, stick around when I'm done talking to Eoghan, because you do not only a news rant, but we're also going to be playing you a track by the Australian death metal band Nothing. In the news rant this week, I'm answering your questions. Those questions include my top 5 favorite black metal albums, as well as my pick between David Vincent and Glen Benton for death metal supremacy. And then, of course, we're also listening to brand new music by Benediction, Blood, Abscission, and many more. That's coming your way later on. In the meantime, make sure that you are subscribed, you are following the show on the socials, you are sharing the episodes, foisting it on enemies, doing all of those great things, and then sit back and enjoy. As I welcome to Into the Necrosphere for the very first time, a fucking man's man and a drummer amongst drummers, Eoghan of Akhlys. I was watching the Brutal Assault clip that they put up of the show that you guys played last year, and I've always thought the drumming in Akhlys is really good. But I was watching you, specifically concentrating on you as you guys did Effie Altus, and I sat there thinking, this motherfucker is the baddest of the bad. And I instantly, that's when I sent you a message. I was like, fancy coming on the show at some point? So, yeah, dude. Now, what happened since is, maybe we'll kind of start here and then we'll work our way back, and then back to the middle again. But When I spoke to Naas yesterday night, he revealed to me that apparently you've only been a drummer for 6 years.
Well, I've been playing drums seriously since 2012, but when I joined Aortos and then later Akhlys, that's when I started really getting into extreme stuff as far as drumming goes. So, you know, even by then I still wasn't that experienced.
Where did all of this talent come from? Because I'm annoyed at you just because I also understand you're a great guitarist, you're a great bassist. It's like next thing you're going to say, oh, by the way, I can belt out a tune like Mark Lanigan, and I can do a pretty decent death metal growl too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, I started playing guitar actually 22 years ago at this point. So, you know, I've been a musician for a long time. And, you know, back then I was really into progressive, like extreme stuff like Watchtower, you know, and when I say extreme, it's like bending time signatures and, you know, crazy music theory and stuff. So, you know, I've always wrapped my head around that type of stuff.
What was your background as far as, because you're a little younger than Naas and myself. You know, from my investigations, you're mid-30s now. So
correct.
I mean, there is like a 8-9 year gap in metal terms is actually, you don't always think about it, but it's pretty lengthy.
Yeah.
What was your start as far as music is concerned? Like, what was your first and your earliest memory of music, discovering music for yourself or hearing something that you really liked?
Sure. Well, as far as music in general, you know, my grandma always listened to like classic country and stuff. So that was kind of my earliest memory. But I actually started getting into heavy music pretty early too, when I was around 7 years old. You know, my dad showed me the Black Album by Metallica. You know, that's kind of a cliche starting point. But my stepdad in particular, he was a thrasher in the 80s. So, you know, he showed me Overkill, Flotsam and Jetsam, SOD, you know, Stormtroopers of Death. He was big into Iron Maiden, and then of course Pantera, Cowboys and Vulgar era. And he showed me Fate's Warning, Amorphous. You know, there's a long list of stuff, and you know, this is when I was between 7 and 10 years old.
Oh wow. And that's I mean, like how did you take to that music initially? Because I know for myself, it is this gradual slide down into your brain almost kind of catching up to what you're hearing. You know, I heard AC/DC, made perfect sense, loved it. I heard Enter Sandman and won. Both of those songs are awesome. I got the Black Album, I got Injustice for All. But it took me like a couple of years before death metal actually made sense. I remember somebody actually gave me a copy of Legion. And I remember hearing it for the first time, thinking this is fucking garbage. Like my brain just didn't compute what was going on. And it took me like, you know, actually like a year or two later where I went back and I heard Deicide. Ironically, actually, I heard Sacrificial Suicide on an instructional video about satanic music, parents keeping your kids away from it. But I mean, like it was that there was like a hook in that song, you know, the breakdown, the damn to hell in my life. That's what kind of stuck with me. And that then metastasized into, again, you know, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about making more sense, just kind of clicking for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I had a pretty big crash course as far as getting into thrash and stuff, but you know, this is still before hearing like death growls or any sort of black metal screaming. So, you know, like I mentioned, you know, Flotsam and Jetsam, for example, there's more of that power metal, high pitched kind of stuff that Eric AK did. And, you know, SOD, that's the Anthrax guy. So I was listening to Anthrax, and, you know, obviously Belladonna does that same kind of power vocals. So that's really what I first heard. And as far as like the heaviness of Metallica, you know, I didn't really understand that was a guitar like doing chugs and stuff. Cause, you know, like I said, my heard classic country before, so all acoustics and stuff like that. But you know, by the time I'm getting into middle school, this is when I find Cannibal Corpse and Nile and Dying Fetus. So you know, I hear thrash, and at this point I didn't realize it was possible to go any heavier.
Yeah.
But that at that point was the big eye-opening moment, and hearing drums be that fast. So I first had interest in guitar, but now I'm hearing drums. That how is this physically possible type of deal.
Yeah. It's interesting with thrash because so we have been threatening now for over a year to do we do these specials on the podcast called 666 countdowns, and it's myself, the outlaw Mike Scondado, and Sensei Mike Hill of Tombs. We do like a countdown where we'll take 90s death metal or 90s black metal. The next one we want to do is thrash and crossover.
Nice.
When we called it out, it was only after I kind of went back and started listening to, discovering new stuff. You kind of go, there's so much fucking good stuff there. You can almost you can do a 666 countdown by year. But the other thing is, you just kind of touched on something there around wondering whether you could hear something heavier. The impression you get when you go back and listen to some of those bands and you watch old interviews or read old interviews, I don't think they thought there could be anything heavier than what they were putting out at the time.
Totally.
What of those old albums, especially that stuff that was coming out in the 80s, what are some of your favorite records from that era?
My favorites, I'll go back to Overkill again. Horoscope is a big one for me. Flotsam and Jetsam, Doomsday for the Deceiver, and No Place for Disgrace. Sepultura, Beneath the Remains in particular, and Arise. So, obviously they kind of allude to early death metal type of stuff.
Yeah.
And Whiplash is another one that kind of has the powery kind of vocals. Insult to Injury is a good record by them. Stuff like that. So it's kind of, I since I started with the more power vocals, I tend to have like an affinity for that style. Because it's still heavy musically, but there's melody in the vocals and stuff.
Yeah, you never got into stuff like Sarcophago, that sort of thing, like the because there was like thrash metal that sort of had that. It kind of had the thrash, all those hallmarks of thrash, the gang vocals,
right.
the breakdowns and stuff like that. But it had this undercurrent of black metal going as well. Sarcophago, right. The Laws of Scourge, and Inri. To me, two great examples of that. Forbidden Evil, I really like as well.
Mm-hmm.
All of the Dark Angel albums. Were you into that kind of stuff?
I definitely like Dark Angel. To be honest, I never got into Sarcophago until later when I was deeper into black metal. But I liked the first Destruction record. There was kind of black metal-ish stuff happening with Schmear's vocals. And then, of course, Bestial Devastation, Sepultura, and Schizophrenia. But no, besides that, it was certainly a lot of cleaner vocals. Nasty Savage I was into a lot.
Yeah.
And Power Mad, Testament. So, some gritty vocals. But yeah, as far as early thrash connecting to black metal, never, not until later for me.
Mm-hmm. Nasty Savage brought out a new, I don't know whether they've brought out, actually they have brought out a new album, because I remember hearing a single off of it last year, and that was pretty decent.
Yeah, definitely.
Testament I'm still a huge fan of. I think they're one of the few bands that can still, put out very, very high quality music, even though they've been around for 3 decades plus.
Sure.
And then something that I really loved last year, I've raved about it on the podcast many times, and if you mentioned Bestial Devastation and Morbid Visions. What did you think of those Cavalera re-recordings of those records?
I am absolutely on board with them, man. They sound incredible to me.
No, I fucking loved it. I thought I kind of said, because I've made several jokes about Max Cavalera in the past. I said, from now on, he can do whatever the fuck he wants. After the after the Bestial Devastation, Morbid Visions, and especially that Schizophrenia re-recording, he has a free pass to fucking do a duet with Cardi B for all I care.
No shit.
It's like you can do whatever you want. So when did thrash then evolve? You mentioned discovering death metal like Cannibal Corpse and stuff like that. What was the first Cannibal Corpse album that you heard?
First Corpse album I heard, it was actually 2 of them, because at this point it's 2002, 2003, so all the services like LimeWire's coming out, so you could download torrents and singles and stuff.
Stealing music, were you?
Yeah, stealing music a long time ago. But no, so in middle school, this was my first time meeting my friends who turned me on to this stuff, and so at this point, Cannibal Corpse had just come out with Gore Obsessed, so that was what my first full album that I got of theirs. But of course, I heard Split Wide Open from Tomb of the Mutilated, so that was hearing Chris Barnes for the first time. So I would say those two, Tomb of the Mutilated and Gore Obsessed, were my first Corpse records.
Which is kind of two extremes, because Tomb of the Mutilated, my first exposure to Cannibal Corpse was The Bleeding, which was the same for a lot of people. Sure. That and Hearing Hammer Smashed Face on Ace Ventura. Right. But again, it was kind of it took a more accessible song like Stripped, Raped, and Strangled for me to properly grasp Cannibal Corpse and then open my mind to everything else that they were doing and everything else that was going on. But I think Gore Obsessed it's a very heavy, very technical album, but there's a lot of songs, particularly kind of from track 6 onwards, Drowning in Viscera, Hung and Bled, Mutation of the Cadaver. They're pretty catchy. They're more memorable, and some people will hate me for saying this, but they're more memorable, I think, than most of what was on Tomb of the Mutilated. Right.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with back in the Tomb of the Mutilated days, it seems like they were more cohesive writing as a unit, whereas by the time they were, doing stuff like Gore Obsessed, Jack was bringing a song, Pat was bringing a song, and so they kind of collaborated in the bigger picture rather than in the song itself. Yeah. But Hung and Bled is one of my most favorite Cannibal Corpse songs of all time, and that's kind of like a deeper cut for that era.
Yeah, well, I remember seeing them live for the first time when they did that, and it was fucking brilliant. Never done it since, right? But did it on that tour. I think it was 2000, maybe late 2002 or 2003 that I saw them.
Makes sense, yeah.
But they blew my mind. I think they might have done Drowning in Viscera as well. But yeah, they've got a couple of runs of deeper cuts on that era, on the Wretched Spawn as well. I think everything from Nothing Left to Mutilate. Actually, everything from the track, The Wretched Spawn on, but particularly Wretched Spawn and Nothing Left to Mutilate, just fucking savage songs, and songs that should get their flowers way more than they do.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I was thinking about that the other day with Wretched Spawn. Paul kind of gets a bad rap for being one of the simpler death metal drummers. And if you listen to a song like Blunt Force Castration, he's doing some shredding level fills in there. So
he does have a style that, like, I'd read the criticism, and I can't drum myself. I admire it tremendously. So again, as I said, when I saw you play, I was like, for this cat knows his shit. But it's like, so I admire it, possibly partly because I can't do it. But it's sure. I've listened to him, and I've tried to understand where the criticism comes from, and I must agree with you. I don't get it. I mean, I know he doesn't have a style that's necessarily similar to a lot of other drummers, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think having your own style, doing your own thing, is not a bad thing at all.
Absolutely, and he has song arranging abilities, so it's like he contributes to the band in a huge way. And as far as the bomb blast, that's like kind of his main blasting technique, where he's doing the two-handed kind of with double bass underneath it. So it's similar to like the opening drum beat of Angel of Death, where Dave Lombardo's doing the fast double bass with the hits on the 1 and 3. He's just Paul's double timing the snare hits. So, that revolutionized a whole style of drumming, at least in my opinion.
The thing is also, people need to remember what those guys grew up on and what got them into drumming in the first place. Yep. They weren't listening to Deicide and Cannibal Corpse and Death and stuff like that. They were listening to Sodom, Creator, Venom, bands like that. And those bands didn't have blasts. So, why would they have kind of taken naturally to it? Pete Sandoval was an outlier in that regard. A couple of other drummers were an outlier in that regard. But even Steve Ashim, didn't. I mean, he played blasts, but it wasn't. If you listen to the first Deicide, I mean, there's so many technical mistakes there, and those all, in my view, make the first album even better because it's
Absolutely.
you imagine in your mind he's so possessed for Satan that he just he can barely hit the snare drum properly. But,
exactly. Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
In Denver, my entire life.
Urban living. You weren't living like in a rural spot anyway. How big was metal in the school that you were in?
Well, it was honestly pretty non-existent. Like anybody that I got metal from was parental figures. So I mean, and even when I got to middle school, I mentioned my friends that turned me on to death metal. Those are really the only two guys in that school. And then high school is, by that time, I was kind of creating metalheads in my circle. So, I mean, it was pretty scarce. But, I was in suburban, like Broomfield, Westminster area, so that's kind of northwest of Denver, but still not rural. But not a lot of friends into metal for a long time.
What's the what's the culture like in that area? Is it very religious? Is it very conservative? Like what are people like?
Yeah, I would say conservative for sure. Mild religion, no one too gung ho like in the Bible Belt. Just kind of like traditional nuclear family type of stuff going on up there. But the like preppy kind of jockey types. And then of course, in the mid 2000s when all that scene post hardcore stuff came out, that's when I was in high school. So that was like a big, rebelling against that type of shit.
Yeah. I mean, between that and the other style that I truly detested was metalcore. I mean, I know a lot of people, go back and talk about new metal, but at the very least, with new metal, at least the bands sounded distinct from each other. Yeah, many of them might not have been bands that I liked, but in the 2000s, the amount of fucking dross that was coming out that just sounded all of it exactly the same as the other bands. I couldn't fucking stand that. It was the homogenization of metal I couldn't take. And at least there was exciting stuff happening in extreme music at the time, but Kill Switch Engage and bands like that, fucking that from the start, that just wasn't for me.
Oh man, I was gung ho on being anti all that stuff. Just yeah, I couldn't take it.
So how old were you when you picked up your first instrument?
First instrument would have been guitar, and I was turning 13.
What was the catalyst for that?
Definitely finding extreme music. Because, it just blew my mind how fast they were playing, especially like Dying Fetus and Nile. That's when I first started hearing sweeps. Carl Sanders did sweeping. And of course, John Gallagher, and when you think of sweep picking nowadays, it's like really clean neoclassical type of stuff. But those guys, they're sweeping, but it has like a chaotic feel to it. They're not thinking about any music theory or like this minor arpeggio into this one. They're just fucking doing it.
Well, I mean, I'd say John Gallagher in particular. He's got a really. I mean, he's technically incredibly proficient.
Absolutely,
but he's got a fucking filthy way of playing. Especially if you like. I mean, what record would have been the first one that you discovered? Stop at Nothing, War of Attrition. I would imagine would have been around that era.
It would have been Destroy the Opposition. Just came out when I found them. And but yeah, Stop at Nothing. Since I was a huge fan of Dying Fetus, Stop at Nothing was my first record of them that I was anticipating as a new one.
Got it. Okay. So, yeah, my first taste of them was Purification Through Violence, and it was a grimy, sleazy record right down to the samples. Yes. Killing on Adrenaline completely and utterly blew me away. Destroy the Opposition blew me away. I mean, they actually haven't put out a record that I've disliked. I was a little lukewarm to that period between Stop and Nothing and Reign Supreme.
Sure.
But when Reign Supreme came out, as soon as I heard From Womb to Waste, I was just completely and utterly hooked on that band again.
Yeah, that's a good one, especially that opening clip.
So no, because I'm seeing you in the in the background. You've got an acoustic guitar. You didn't go the route of playing acoustic guitar first, then getting an electric guitar. You went straight electric and started playing along to Nile and to your favorite Nile and Dying Fetus tracks.
Yep. And actually, one of my first riffs was "No Remorse" by Metallica. Yeah. So my first guitar was a bronze BC Rich Warlock, and that was like straight into electric guitar.
So about as metal as you can get from the get go.
Exactly.
At this point, did you have any ideas of starting to play in a band? I mean, I imagine most guys that age that pick up a guitar at least have some idea that if they meet people that are like-minded, that play instruments, they're going to write some music.
Sure, yeah. Well, I definitely spent the first couple years just kind of playing by myself, learning tabs, how to read tabs and stuff. And just really trying to get my physicality going. But I mean, only 2 years in, because 2003 or 2002 was when I started playing. Somewhere in there, it's a little vague, but let's see. Yeah, about 2 years in, that's when I got into high school. That's when I started like, okay, now I'm ready to make a band as far as where my mind was at the time.
What was the first band that you were in?
The first band I was in, there was a couple where it was just, me and another guitar player friend that was just screwing around. And yeah, we're a band, but we don't have a drummer or a bassist type of thing. But my first real band was a band called Dromora. And this was when I met my first friend who was a drummer. And he was, also in the same headspace with thrash and stuff. So my first band was thrash. So I kind of, discovered extreme music, but kind of backpedaled a little bit to the original attitude of thrashers in the 80s.
There's also something to be said about, especially music you discovered when you were young. If you had a happy childhood, if there's memories attached to that,
yeah,
you're always going to like going back to it. I mean, if I'm sitting down and I'm having a couple of glasses of wine and I'm watching, I'm skimming around on YouTube and stuff like that, I will always inevitably, the more wine I've imbibed, I will inevitably go back to, hey, can you remember when we saw that music video on MTV Headbangers Ball? Oh, let's watch it now. And it's like,
great,
you get into The Lost and Curse of Reverence, Dominus, Rapture, then live clips of Slayer, Pantera, Biohazard, all that sort of stuff. You always go back to the stuff that kind of gives you that feeling from when you were young.
Yeah.
With your so played guitar, at what point did you pick up the bass?
Bass, I mean, I never fully became a bass player. I just play it like a guitar. So I could probably say at the same time, I'm just like, hey man, let me try your bass, and just played it. But when I started getting into jazz and orchestra in high school, that's when actually let me back up, because I was into Primus before this. So I kind of heard.
Oh, now you've taken us on a wild left turn.
Yeah. But I mean, I've liked Primus because I was into South Park and stuff. So
yeah.
But Les does the slapping and popping type of crazy technical playing. So when I first started playing guitar, I would play it like Newstead. But then once I started expanding my ability to actually play an instrument, then I started revisiting stuff like Les Claypool playing. So around that time, if I put a year on it, it'd be like 06, 07. So heavy into jazz and stuff like that.
Claypool, I mean, people can say what they want about Primus. I'm not the biggest Primus fan.
It's weird shit,
but he is a great bassist, an extraordinary bassist. And I I'll give them their flowers. My discovery of Primus was was at Woodstock '94. I saw the video of them doing DMV, which is a fucking great song, and I thought, wow, awesome! All of their songs going to sound like this.
Not so much.
I was braced for disappointment, mate.
Yeah, there's weirdness going on.
If we talk about thrash, though, I mean, some of the best bassists came from the thrash scene.
Yep.
Who were some of your, and I'm asking it out of curiosity more than anything else.
Sure.
Who are some of your favorite bassists? Whether they're from thrash or whatever other genre of music.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned Newstead, so he's a big one. Particularly going back to Flotsam, because he was doing basically tremolo picking on a bass pretty early. So he's a big one. Let's see. Back into, you could say all the Metallica bass players are great. And, when Trujillo was in Suicidal, I was a big Suicidal fan as well. So, those two are good. And also, so Voivod, I have not mentioned Voivod yet, but Voivod is the most influential band on my entire outlook of metal in general. And Blackie, the bass player, the original bassist, he's a big influence on mine too. And actually in the Akhlys records, it's a similar tone to what Blackie's doing, distorted with a pick type of tone. So that's kind of where that was born from, at least for my influence.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, again, I didn't realize that. I do like Voivod as well. Mm-hmm. But like I said, you threw a couple of curveballs here. Where did black metal come into the mix? When did you discover that?
Yeah. Well, when I was first getting into extreme music, the death metal bands I mentioned, when I got to high school, I met a couple of other friends, and they started showing me stuff like Immortal. So my first black metal record was Damned in Black. And, Immortal style is a bit more straightforward for black metal. And there's actually some death metal type of stuff going on musically. But so I heard Damned in Black, Dimmu Borgir. At that time, I think Puritanical and Death Cult were new. Satyricon, they were kind of, going more experimental at that point. And then Old Man's Child. So that was my first glimpse into black metal were those bands. So
when did you take that fascination to the next level? Because
sure.
It's very clear when you listen to Akhlys's music, and obviously I know Naas writes the lion's share of the material, but there is definitely a shared love of the more Cavalt, the grimmer, the more necro, the more true stuff than necessarily Old Man's. Not that Old Man's Child is bad, but you know what I mean. Like that's the introduction to it, but the taster's choice. That's the kind of stuff that I think maybe informs Akhlys's sound a bit more.
Yes, you are definitely right. Well, all the thrash and death metal aside, my first real breakthrough with black metal was Enslaved, Below the Lights. So, that's when they're kind of going fully prog type of stuff. But at the same time, that's probably their biggest pivotal album. So when I heard Enslaved, that's when, I was like, okay, there's a big depth to this style of music that I was kind of ignorant to when I first heard it, because I was more into like more brutality and more notes and, shredding and stuff. So through Enslaved, I found, Bathory, Emperor, Burzum, and actually Absu is a big influence for my drumming in particular. Proscriptor does all the drumming on Absu. And so that was kind of when I first heard, aside from Nick Barker, at that level of black metal or symphonic, Absu was definitely a big one for me that actually influenced me.
What then prompted you to pick up the drums?
Well, as a guitar player and playing with drummers, I was always like, hey man, can I try your kit? Because I've always liked drumming just naturally. Like you could feel it, rhythm, especially metal drumming. It's fucking awesome with double bass and stuff. So you kind of want to experience that as a musician. So when I just started messing around on other drummers' kits, that's when I was like, okay, this is pretty awesome. But it still took me a while to actually be in a band as a drummer. Actually, my first project as a drummer was still in high school, and the guitar player is one of the founding members of Wayfarer. So that
okay,
yeah, there's a connection in the scene there. I went to high school with him.
Yeah.
And so, we were doing like a death metal band, and that was kind of his first project, writing riffs and stuff. And, he's a lot younger than me at the time. So, it just kind of turned into, I like playing drums now. And then like, okay, I could actually kind of keep good time here. So I'm getting more serious. And then, I joined a band called Pile of Priest.
Who were your early influences when it came to drumming? Because you have now with Akhlys, you've got an incredibly attacking style of drumming, but you also, and I mean this in a very complimentary way, you remind me a little bit of Chasen Westmoreland in the sense that you have such precision and such fucking incredible timing that literally you hear it on album and you go, there's no fucking way that's a human being doing it. And until you actually see you doing it live,
yeah,
you just completely gobsmacked.
For sure. Well, I listened to a lot of tech death for a while, in particular Necrophagist. So Hannes Grossman is a big starting point as far as me getting into faster, more technical drumming. And Akhlys, like we have odd time signatures and stuff, but as far as like technical, like flashy jazz type of stuff, I don't really do that. I keep it more on the side of Simon Schilling from Marduk type of style, or Kevin Parody. When he does black metal, it's not technical from a music theory perspective. It's like just crushing and feels like that. But going back to early influences, Nick Barker absolutely 100% is a huge influence on me as far as my entry into black metal drumming. So
I can hear that as well.
Yeah.
And like as you mentioned, Dying Fetus, you could certainly hear some Kevin Talley in the way that you play. What I like about your playing, and it's a big gripe of mine with a lot of extreme music, is I don't like monotonous drumming, especially when the music is fast. Like a lot of bands, when they blast, it really just does sound like they could just use drum kit from hell, or whatever the latest emulator is that they could throw in there, because there's no real feel, there's no intonation with the music. Like you've got a more interpretive way of blasting in the sense that, like, if I think of my favorite drummers, so Pete Sandoval has always been one of those dudes where, again, super precise, but like he's constantly doing rolls, he's constantly doing fills. Like there's never a blast that sounds boring when he's playing. Steve Ashim, another dude. I mean, he's gotten better over the years, in my view. I do prefer his earlier drumming just for the fucking savagery of it. But I mean, even later, he's constantly active and constantly busy. Right. You have a lot of that as well. My other favorite drummer, you mentioned Pantera, Vinnie Paul, I think is phenomenal. I mean, it's phenomenal enough to where I have no interest in seeing them live now, because I just can't imagine. I can't imagine Pantera songs with him not behind the drum kit.
Yeah, it's tough for sure.
But that style of yours, kind of, how did it evolve from you starting being influenced by these people until you kind of found what I think you got a quite distinct signature style of your own?
Cool, yeah. Well, actually, speaking of Vinnie Paul, he is one of my first drumming breakthroughs. In particular, the Cemetery Gates beat. So Vinnie Paul has always had a super good sense of limb independence. There's a lot of stuff that, seems easier now, in retrospect, but when you're learning drums, it's, a physical breakthrough as far as separating, throwing in kick hits in between like a solid beat without, flinching your hand that's leading the count. And in particular on Cemetery Gates, the main riff, the there's the kick drum pattern on there is not really intuitive. And when I actually learned it, that kind of blew open this whole door of independent limbs, brain in this hand type of thing. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that tidbit on the note.
Whenever I've played drums, that's the one thing that I can't wrap my head around it. And again, I think that's partly where my admiration for drummers comes from. Yeah, is the fact that I cannot figure out. But like when I watch drum cam videos, I watch Jamie from Ulcerate or something like that. I cannot figure out how you get your body to do that. Like, how did you get into the discipline of that limb separation?
Yeah, well, starting there with Vinnie Paul, absolutely for sure. And then, it just kind of came naturally, I guess, because I got into Meshuggah later, and, we all know Thomas Hokke. Oh, he's one of the most insane drummers as far as, like I said, limb independence goes. It's like he has two different bodies. So Meshuggah is a good influence for me as far as that type of thing goes as well. But initially when I joined this band called Pile of Priests, they have thrash foundations, and we evolved into more of like a Stockholm, Gothenburg sound, melodic death metal style. A lot of At the Gates riffs. And one thing that I brought to the table was kind of like Coroner type of feel. And so basically the gist of Pile of Priest was melodic death metal with technical thrash type of undertones. And, we got into atheist, pestilence, cynic type of era of death metal. So a lot of my drumming stems from that as well. So
again, these are going to sound like silly questions, but it's just things I'm deeply curious about. How, in those early days, how many hours a day would you say you were practicing the drums?
For drumming, not as much as I should, that's for sure. But on my own, probably a couple hours a day. But when we would have jam sessions as a band, we'd play like 3 hours sometimes.
Yeah.
So, but another thing that kind of ties back into my jazz and classical background in high school, we did a lot of active listening, so ear training. So there's certain, it really depends on the band, but I could listen to something so much that I could sit down and play it without ever actually having physically played it. Mm. But it, like I said, it depends on the band. I couldn't go and do that with any sort of Nile song, like, George Colias type of thing. But as far as, the Panteras, Metallica's type of stuff, I could definitely sit down and play that after listening to it a bunch. So when I come into Akhlys, I brought that to the table as well. My active listening abilities.
You've hinted at this a couple of times now with the jazz and orchestra stuff. Did you were you in like a jazz orchestra? Were you doing anything like that at school?
Yep, I was. I started out on guitar in jazz, and eventually by the time I was a senior in high school, we lost our drummer for whatever reason. Maybe he dropped out of school or moved on earlier, but I took over drumming we played universities and stuff, jazz festivals, and so I was playing jazz drums around that time.
So you went through the did you have a J.K. Simmons from Whiplash in that jazz. You've surely seen one of the greatest movies ever made.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Oh,
no,
dude.
our teacher was definitely not. He was a drummer, which is funny, but he wasn't like getting in my face and stuff.
He wasn't a complete and utter psychopath. So you mentioned that training has helped you since, and as something that you've brought to the table with Akhlys.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
But I used to write. I mean, I shouldn't say I used to. I still do. I use Guitar Pro when I write guitar music. And in Guitar Pro, you could make MIDI versions of X amount of guitars. You could put a bass in there, and then there's a whole drumming. You type in the sheet music of the drums, and then the MIDI drums play it back. So, when I write music, I'm looking at sheet music and tabs the whole time I'm writing. So that comes from reading sheet music and jazz.
So, which is a nice segue into Akhlys and meeting Naas. Describe your first time meeting Naas.
Yep.
Where was it? What were your first impressions of him?
Yeah. So around this, so this was 2011 when I met him. So around this time, I was in my band called Sons of Sorath. I'm still playing guitar, and Sons of Sorath is progressive, blackened death metal, kind of all rolled together. So, I was sort of realizing all my influences and trying to translate it into one project. So, during this time, we're booking shows with a promoter. Her name is Amanda. Her moniker was Manda Obsidian. So this is Obsidian Fog Promotions. And this, during this time I'm playing shows with, there's a band called Sentimani. Their founding drummer is in Blood Incantation now. We played with the band called Castigation. They became Dreadnought. So now more internationally known bands are starting to have root in a more cohesive Denver scene. And Obsidian Fog booked Nightbringer. So, Kyle's coming up to Denver, or Naas, and I first met him. Actually, my band Sons of Sorath was rehearsing at our drummer's jam space, and he came downstairs and said, "What's up?" And he still had long blonde hair at that time, and he was interested in trying to get our bass player to join Nightbringer. And so we'll bring that back because that's how I got connected to Akhlys. And so my bass player, before I actually met Naas, my bass player at the time, he mentioned, so I'm joining this project Nightbringer, and I have never heard of Nightbringer yet until that point. And Naas writes using Power Tab, and we were writing using Guitar Pro, so we had this already something in common, how we wrote stuff in a tabbing program. But it was a pretty brief interaction. First meeting him, is like, yeah, he's cool. He's into black metal and seems like a nice guy. But unfortunately, our bass player never got around to joining Nightbringer, and so that was around 2011, 2012, and by that time, Naas had to get new lineup changes and stuff going on. But anyway, that's how I met Naas for the first time, 2011.
And how did that relationship progress into the partnership that would eventually become Akhlys, or you joining Akhlys? Yeah.
So my bass player, like I mentioned, he was the one mostly talking to Naas, and my bass player from Sons of Sorath, one of my closest friends of all time. So, we still talk and hang out and all that kind of stuff. But, years later, Sons of Sorath, kind of went on a hiatus, and, some turmoil in the lineup, but it was always me and my bass player, sticking together through the whole thing. We released a record. So by now it's 2017, and I joined another band called Sar Isatum, and this is when I started getting into the more cavernous style of black metal and death metal. Some examples would be like Abigor. I wouldn't consider them cavernous, but more extreme, weird note choices and stuff. So getting into Abigor, Batushka, Panzerfaust, first heard them at the time. I was trying to remember this other band. Convulsing, from I think Australia. So big. It's like death metal, but with black metal kind of production qualities. But anyway, so just trying to set up where I'm leading up into Akhlys, because I heard Dreaming Eye before I even realized it was Naas. And so I was like, man, this is awesome. I had no clue, the connection that was about to happen. So once again, my bass player in Sons of Sorath, he reconnects with Naas later and joins Aortos. And then, at this point, Naas is looking for more of a local lineup so we could all rehearse together in the same state. And, my bass player at the time, he said, you want to join this? And then that's when I met Naas for the second time in December of 2018 at a local metal bar called Black Sky Brewery.
And he said, this is like MS-13, except it's 18 seconds to be jumped in. So,
yeah.
No, well, I mean, so you joined Akhlys right before the recording of Melano, which I said to him last night, that I think will go down as very much a career-defining record for Akhlys. I mean, it is totally like the master of puppets of in the band's discography.
Yeah,
and we were talking about the self-imposed pressure, the expectation of trying to follow up something like that. But as you're working on Melano, what were your thoughts on? Or let's talk first about, like, describe to me what the working relationship was like between you and Naas at that time, and how it's evolved, or how it evolved onto House of the Black Geminus.
Sure, yeah. Well, when I first joined, it was all Aortos at that point, because Naas was interested in taking Aortos live, and I'm sure some people know, but Nox Corvus, currently of Akhlys, he played guitar on the Aortos Gods Without Name album. So when I first joined, it was those two guys. So, original Nightbringer founding members, and then my bass player, who I've known for almost 15 years at that point. And so my first kind of task was to learn that style, and Menthor is the drummer of that. So this is some intense shit. And I credit Menthor as my indirect, most important drum teacher of my entire playing, because I'm learning his stuff, and, this is the next level for me. So, at first it's a lot of learning it and, bringing it to the space where we practice. And, at this point we're getting into using click tracks to be solid live. So, my initial relationship working with Naas is like, learn the parts, and if you could do it, you're good. And I was, fumbling through that, and but I eventually pulled it off.
So as he's sending you, because I know he sends you song ideas, and as at least this is how he explained it to me, as he's sending you songs for Melano, what were your thoughts on what you were hearing there, like on what the quality of the material was like? Did you feel at the time, like, when you're in the thick of things, did you feel like, I'm busy working on something special?
Yeah, well, I first realized that it was going to be big as far as just the overall connection, was when we started doing Somniloquy. It just wrote it, like every single drum part, so he had it completely written right away, and every single drum part was the first thing I came up with for the entire song. So Somniloquy felt like one of those songs that wrote itself. But so getting into that, so now it's like, okay, I'm a member of this band now, and I'm bringing my experience to the table. So I used Superior Drummer to write the drums. So I stopped using Guitar Pro because it's easier to demo with something like Superior Drummer. And Superior Drummer is an evolution of the drum kit from hell, like you mentioned before. So it's more of like, we don't have to actually play in a room together to write this stuff. He could send me everything, and then I just lay it to the grid, the drum ideas, and then bounce it back to him. And then, he'll tell me if anything is great or needs to be changed. So that was what started this writing process, was on Melanoe.
Yeah. Now, one of the songs to me that, again, it's like, you were mentioning No Remorse earlier. For me, the signature Metallica song in my mind, I know it's not the case, but my mind will always be Seek and Destroy.
Yeah.
In the same way that with Slayer, it's, Angel of Death, etc., etc. But Ephialtes is the song. Just from your perspective, and again, it's purely to satisfy my own curiosity.
Sure.
When you heard that the first time, when you heard the ideas come through for the first time, did that stand out to you as a track that would go on to be one of the band's more popular songs?
Definitely not. Actually, we all felt like it was kind of a weirder one at first. But just a lot of it unfolded in the studio as I was tracking drums as well. And, because one of the special things about Ephialtes is, you have the intro and the outro, it's kind of in the brackets of that riff, the infamous creepy melody going on there. And so that, starts the song and ends the song. And in between, it's kind of like riff happens, and it's a little bit different the next time it happens, and then a little bit different the next time. So it's almost like it's kind of turning in on itself while still having the parts that are recognizable. But actually, Dave Otero, our main producer, he had a lot of input on some of the drumming ideas in that song. So that's a little fun fact about that.
Otero, your drumming does make a massive impact in that song, because I teased Naas and said the pomp and the pageantry is something he loves, and he admitted that is true. But that song benefits very much from the fact that the drums kind of start the build up, and then it kind of helps spur the build up on until the song finally explodes. And I mean, it's just perfect when it happens.
Yeah, it's really heavy, and we use in our backing track in the keyboards, we have super hard hitting percussion tones on top of my drumming too. So there's really impactful stuff happening when those hits are going on.
When Melanoe was done, how did you feel about that record? And did you feel like did you have a sense of trepidation, like how do we improve on this album?
Yeah, well, me personally, since that was my first record with Akhlys, and I feel like now through all the touring we've done, my drumming has really significantly gotten better since then. So, I feel like I've done a lot more technically cooler stuff on House of the Black Geminus, but when we finished this, I was like, yeah, this is the craziest drumming I've done so far in comparison to what I've done before.
Yeah.
So, it was definitely there. It's like, yeah, this is going to be, one to top for sure.
How much of a physical toll do these songs take on you when you guys play live? Because you play 45 minutes, give or take, when you do a set. And I mean, playing at the pace that you play, the intensity that you play, the fact that you're not just sticking to a single blast beat.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why you're looking, thin and trim.
Cardio.
I'd be very curious to know how many calories you burn on a given set.
Probably a lot. Because, when we're doing a headlining tour, we play an hour to an hour and 10 minutes, especially when songs like Consummation are on the set list, because that song is our longest live comes in around 14 minutes. And, Consummation, I've timed it. It's about 2.5 minutes of, fast double bass twice in the song. So that's brutal. But, honestly, I don't really feel any sort of strain as long as I warm up enough before the set. Because, like you said, the 45-minute sets, those are usually our festival sets.
Yeah.
And then when we did the DMP Servants of Chaos Fest, we played an hour and a half, and that killed all of us. But we still nailed it. But the one thing about our set list is it's kind of usually even with how many blasts are happening in this song, and then something like Ephialtes has blast, but there's a lot of groove going on. And then like Consummation, there's no blasting until the middle section, and it's just like slow triplet blasts. So there's a lot of variety in Naas's writing that gives me breaks sometimes.
I'm about to say, gives you a natural pause to catch your breath.
Yep. He's very dynamic with, he builds it up, and then we all drop off as a band, so it's like I'm taking a breather right there for a second.
What sort of warm-ups do you do before you go on stage?
I just Thomas Hocke from Meshuggah, I do something similar to him, how he describes his warm-ups. He doesn't use a click, doesn't do anything. He just naturally starts hitting a pad at whatever speed and just hold that for a bit. And, I'll do that for a few minutes. I take the drumsticks and I, do something like this, just kind of shaking my hands. And, drumsticks are yay big. And so it helps me stretch further from side to side on my forearms. And then, for, leg warm-ups, I'll do like non-weighted calf raises, and then just kind of like warming up my hip flexors for full leg motion, because there's a lot of small muscle groups involved in playing this type of stuff. So usually like a half hour of doing that.
And when you're about to go on tour, is there any kind of prep that you do then?
No, the prep that we do, I'll play on my own. Actually, my electric kit's back here. That's how I mostly practice on my own. But when we're about to get ready for tour, we start rehearsing as a band up to 3 times a week for a month straight. So, we start hitting it heavy physically. So basically by the time we're flying out, we just got done rehearsing like hours before we flew. So by the time we land and start playing, we're relatively warmed up aside from the jet lag.
But there's no getting on the rower for 5 miles or things to build your cardio up.
Nope, definitely not. It would benefit me to do something like that, but no, nothing like that.
I did talk to a friend of mine who went on tour with a big band, and the first time that he did it, I said to him, like, because he was gonna front and play bass. I said, do yourself a favor and go to the gym. Like, if you're not used to it, and from everything I'd heard from everybody else, I'm not used to it either, so I speak as a layperson here. But from everything I had heard from everybody else, it's like if you're not physically fit and you get on stage, by the time you get to song 3, with those lights down on you, the adrenaline, and just how physically taxing it is to play this kind of music, you are not going to make it.
Nope. And Naas works out, and Abraxas, our bass player, he works out, and me and Nox Corvus, we kind of just have a naturally active nervous system. So if you've seen his picking hand live, it's blazing. So not much to that. We just kind of play more, and then we're naturally more warmed up by the time we actually play shows.
So for House of the Black Geminus, how did your dynamic with Naas change? Because he gave me the impression when I spoke to him that you might be one of the only people who he would take seriously when they tell him I don't like that riff, or that's not working. Like you've definitely gained, and you probably know this, but you've definitely gained in his mind an awful lot of respect. Like knowing the style as he has described it to me, the way he likes to work, the way he does his thing, just kind of my observation of him as a person. I mean, I think that's saying quite a lot for how much he respects you as a musician.
Sure, absolutely, and it's greatly appreciated, and I'm honored as hell to be a part of this whole thing. But I could say again, back into my jazz roots, you're playing off of other people. So it's like there's like a level of energy transfer that you have to read other players. And so, I've played in so many bands, some have, not really gotten much traction, but it all adds up in experience, so. And as a drummer, I'm good at finding cues from guitar players. So when I approach Naas's playing, and it's such a great big wall of sound and really dense many instrument layers going on, it opens my ear even more. So like I'm really digging into his style, and one of the big things that he likes is accents on riffs, to really make it pop out. We could use Ephialtes as an example. The there's a lot of accenting going on, and the blasting riff, like so it brings impact to his riffs, and he's been looking for that kind of thing for a while. So I'm really putting my heart into his music, and trying to share the feeling that we get. So that's what reflects in my playing.
So House of the Black Geminus is out. You guys are, I mean, definitely in terms of your trajectory, you're on the ascent. You're also you have your detractors. I've got to ask, how does the naysaying and the boos from the gallery and the the moral Gestapo going after you guys the way that they do, how does that impact on you? Because I mean, I know Naas definitely seems to catch a lot of the breeze, or sort of he's kind of the he's the lightning rod for a lot of that bullshit. Yep. But I mean, it must have some degree of impact on the rest of the band and on you. You seem to have established yourself as kind of the one of the main dudes in the band.
Yeah.
How are you? How do you see it? How does it affect you? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I support Naas till the bitter end, but it doesn't really affect me as outside of, we lose a few shows here and there, like cancellations. But I mean, other than that, social media, whatever, I don't get any flack or nothing, and Naas does an incredible job of, explaining, the truth about everything. So
and shielding the rest of you guys from any of that blowback.
Exactly. Yeah. So he's like the perfect face of this, granted how much shit he's taken for it. Yeah. But he handles it great, and all of us, we just kind of laugh about it and just keep moving forward exactly how we're doing things musically and making records and stuff. It's like, it's not going to slow our momentum at all.
If anything, I was about to say, if anything, it has just made you guys more popular, which hopefully is a sign that the world is changing. I don't quite know if that's if it's changing at the speed we would like it to change.
Sure, but
I definitely see with the fact that you guys had your detractors on Reddit forums, but that contingent of people seems to be becoming smaller and smaller. Like I think you've truly made music that is undeniable. I got two last questions for you. Question one, musically, what is there for you? What do you want as a musician? What's the one thing left unconquered? The one milestone that you want to reach?
Yeah, man. I mean, we have achieved a lot with what we've done in the last 5 years as Akhlys. like touring, making brotherhoods with, the bands that we tour with. Almost every band that opens for us, our touring mates on the Fides Inversa Chaos Invocation tour, brothers for life with those guys. So, that would have been my answer before all this touring. I just want to get out there and see the world and connect with all these people. So now my personal goal as a musician is, I could play all these instruments. I have yet to release my own record, and I'm actually sitting on a lot of songs that I could record and put out. So that's me personal, my personal goals.
Have you got a timeline on when you might do that?
I'm hoping, this year I could actually start buckling down and getting the tracks knocked out.
With all of your other projects, so you've got, this is according to Metal Archive, but according to Metal Archive active, you still have Astraeus, Pallas Somni, Sons of Sorath, and then past bands, Dramura, Part of Priests, Sarisatum. What is actually still active, or is at least kind of the only focus?
It is definitely the main focus. I recently reconnected with the drummer of Sarisatum, and we have something in the works where we're basically renewing Sarisatum, like the songs that we wrote, because I had to leave that project when Akhlys started going places. So obviously that's still the main focus, but now that I've experienced the pattern of our touring and recording cycles, in between I could do projects, but a lot of those, like Sons is kind of on a hiatus. It's just me and the bass player I was talking about, and then Pallas Somni, that's what I did with Dan from Decoherence. So we've made a record. It's not really active at the moment, but it's not disbanded, so there's a bit of a gray area with some of those.
Final question.
Yes.
Is Bleed by Meshuggah as hard as it looks to play on the drums? I saw a video of Thomas doing it, and it just looked, I couldn't wrap my head around it.
It is. Absolutely is. Yes.
Yeah. Can you do it?
I can do the first variation of the hertas he does. I could do it for a couple measures, but after a while, it's there comes kind of a disconnect, and then they start morphing it into it's a group of three with 2 hits in between. Now it's a group of 3 with 3, 2, 1 hits. So Meshuggah, they put that riff under a microscope, and yeah. I definitely have no desire to even attempt that whole song.
Well, brother, thank you so much for your time. And I am really looking forward to meeting you in person at Fortress.
Yes.
Congratulations on, again, as I've mentioned before, the highest accolade in all of extreme music, Album of the Year 2024 Into the Necrosphere. You're in the annals of history.
It's great, man. It's a great honor, and I appreciate doing this podcast with you.
An absolute pleasure speaking to Eoghan. I hope that you guys enjoyed that conversation, and if you didn't enjoy the song that you just heard, you need to get the goddamn wax out of your ears. That was Akhlys. The song is called Eye of the Demon, Demon Eye, taken from the award-winning House of the Black Geminus album that came out in 2024, Album of the Year on Into the Necrosphere, released by Deborah Morty Productions. And as always, the link to that record will be in the description to the podcast. So head over to the Akhlys Bandcamp, buy yourself some music, let them know not only that it was old Jackson at Into the Necrosphere who sent you, but also remind them of how excited you are to see them play at Fortress Festival. I know I certainly am. I hope to see you guys there. Remember, it's going to be Akhlys, 1349, Ruim, Abduction. A bunch of you guys have been messaging me saying you've been catching Abduction on some of their local shows recently, and apparently AV and the gang are absolutely tearing it up every single night. So I'm super excited about that, and I'm super excited about hopefully getting to meet a couple of you guys when I'm at Fortress in June. Right now, we're going to listen to another new track. The lads from Nothing out of Australia made me aware that they've just put out a brand new single. It is the title track off their forthcoming album. The album is called The Self-Repair Manifesto. I've featured them on the podcast previously. I love their music. I think you guys are going to as well. Here's what it sounds like.
She was at one with the fire. She was at one
You just heard the self-repair manifesto of the album of the same name. The band is Nothing, out of Melbourne, Australia. Great stuff. Bandcamp link available in the description to the podcast. If you like what you heard, you can head over there, order it. I believe that they are going to have pre-orders available until March the 12th. And then, after that, I don't exactly know what they're going to be doing with physical formats of the music, but regardless, support the band. Perhaps we may even get one of the Nothing crew on the podcast at some point to sit in on a news rant. Speaking of news rants, if on Instagram you happen to go by the handle Criminal Synod, my suggestion to you would be to get a facelift, a brain transplant, a personality makeover, and then hit the bricks, because this is my weekly news rant.
Round them up for judgment. And hang them where the world can see.
All right, friends, we kick off on metalstorm.net as always. Let's start with some music. Fair here are back with a brand new track called Hail Mary. No idea who Fair here are. The thumbnail on the video that they've presented here makes it seem as though, I don't know whether it's their vocalist or whether it's just an actor in the music video. We'll find out, no doubt, in a few seconds. But it looks like he's been hitting that moonshine a little bit too much. But anyway, it says here, black metal representatives Fair here have launched Hail Mary, the newest preview tune of their oncoming studio album, Urgewalt. The latter hits the streets on April the 4th on Vendetta Records. Let's listen. That earns a thumbs up for me. Firstly, let me correct myself. They're not called Fair here. They're called Verheerer. So I apologize for my mispronunciation, although by now you guys should be pretty it should be pretty customary that I'm not always going to get the pronunciations correct. But anyway, skipping past all of that, they're from Germany. They've been around since 2008. Verheerer, for those interested, is the German, or apparently it's the German or Dutch word for devastator. Put out their first album back in 2018. That was called Maltrad. They then put out Monolith in 2019, and they happen to share a label with Into the Necrosphere approved Woe and Ultha. So two great bands. Vendetta Records, pretty decent when it comes to the old black metal, and seems to me like they have signed another good one. And as a matter of fact, actually, Verheerer seems to have been on Vendetta Records pretty much for all of their career. So, yeah, I like it very much. I think the main riff is awesome. There's something that's, and I don't say it just because Eoghan and I spoke about it on the conversation, or during the conversation we had, but there's something a little Vinnie Paulish about those drums. Like, it's very... the way that the drummer places accents on certain parts of the song, the way that he's sort of quite intuitive with particularly the double bass. It reminds me a little bit of Vinnie Paul. But what I do like about it is anytime that the band goes into anything melodic and you think that they're about to maybe wimp out a little bit, they tend to, step up the voltage. They tend to crank up the old juice a little bit at just the right time. So, love it. Very keen to hear what the rest of the sounds like. April the 4th is when that album gets released, and that is certainly on my watch list for a couple of weeks from now. All right, let's see what is next. Nattverd have put out a new song. It says here, less than 2 weeks prior the release of their official 5th LP, Tidlos Nodselus, black metalers Nattverd offer in listening another new track in preview called Dutsvogel. Let's hear it. Superb vocals by Doods Admiral, also of Doodsvanger, Horde of Hell, Noordjevel, and Zwartelder fame, in case you guys weren't aware. Again, if you don't know that, you probably shouldn't be listening to this podcast. Now, I do recall listening to the previous single that they put out off this record and liking that, but I will say this, to me, is even better. Part of what makes it better is that weird left field music box that they toss in there around the 1 minute 20 mark, and it just sounds, between that and the sort of howling noises that they have in the background, it just elevates the song into something that is so much more haunting and so much more impactful and effective. Love it. The fact that it's got, a really, really crisp but still gritty production job, that to me is just the crown jewel on it. This is a definite top notch. So very, very much looking forward to the release of this record. March the 21st is when it's due out. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to have to see if I can get one of these dudes on Into the Necrosphere and have me a conversation with them, because this is fucking excellent. Really, really good. Okay, let's answer some questions, and we're going to start with one that I just really like the look of. Devster666 asks, David, Vincent, or Glen Benton? Now, initially when I saw that, I thought, that's going to be a tough one. And then the more I pondered it, the more I realized, actually, it's not tough whatsoever. On one hand, you got David Vincent, absolute legend. He did work across Altars of Madness, Blessed Are the Sick, Covenant, and Domination that I think is amongst the most influential in probably death metal, certainly death metal, definitely blackened death metal, and maybe extreme music as a whole. In addition, the work that he did on the 2 Ultimass records, in particular the most recent one, I think is superb. He can sing incredibly well in addition to the, screaming or growling death metal vocals. And with the exception of a reasonably questionable or some questionable fashion choices, he's generally speaking a very, very good frontman. I've seen him live with Morbid Angel. I've seen him live with Ultimass. I've mentioned before, my wife saw Ultimass, and even though she is not of the scene, doesn't like this music, even she had to comment afterwards, that is the way that you put on a show. In the red corner, we've got Glen Benton. Probably responsible for, in my opinion, the greatest death metal vocal performance ever recorded. That performance being the first Deicide record. There is nothing, I think, that has been documented in music that is so unhinged, so hateful, so angry, and so aggressive. It's why I mentioned a couple of weeks ago when I was asked the question about what band or what album I would have loved to have seen recorded. I would love to have been in the studio when he did some of those vocal takes just to see where some of that insanity, some of that savagery was coming from. The other thing that you have to say about Glen is that even when Deicide have had a bad day in the office, like In Torment in Hell is a bad day in the office for Deicide as far as I'm concerned. And some of their more recent records haven't cut the mustard for me either, but even when the albums haven't been the best, his vocals are still superb, and that's almost universally accepted. I still prefer the higher-pitched, more enunciated vocal style that he had on Legion and on Deicide, but he is still, even when he's doing the really, really deep growls like he's doing nowadays, he still sounds excellent. He also turned in another 2 of certainly the most impressive guest vocal performances. Actually, I say guest vocal performances. He was the vocalist, but you know what I mean. The 2 Vital Remains albums, Icons of Evil and Dechristianize. I mean, that was ferocity, again, on a level that very, very few men or women has ever been able to match. So, I've got to say, give it to Glen Benton. Quite easily, as a matter of fact. I think David is great. He's a superb frontman. Good dude. I've had him on the podcast, in case you haven't seen that episode. But Glen is, he edges it reasonably easily for me, based on the fact that those first 2 Deicide albums, to me, are the best death metal vocals that has ever been recorded. No one has come close. Many have tried. No one has been able to equal that for sheer believability. Like, you believe that he means every single thing that he is singing there, and that to me makes it absolutely awesome. But like I said, it's not taking away from David Vincent. Just happens to be my preference. I think Glen is the man. There's no 2 ways about it. Let's get another question. Riley Rust Fish Hunt asks, if you could jump in a time machine, what is the one thing you would tell a band to not do that they have? That's a slightly tougher one. But off the top of my head, the first thing that springs to mind is I would have advised Morbid Angel against recording Illud Divinum Insanus. I think that record, for a number of reasons, was so poorly received that in many ways it just turned people off Morbid Angel altogether. I think that Kingdoms Disdained, as an example, is a far, far better record than Illud. And most folks, including people that would consider themselves reasonably diehard Morbid Angel fans, have been very much indifferent to it. People complain about the production, and there's stuff about the record that they don't like, but actually, go back and listen to it right now. You'll see what I mean. If you don't kind of listen to it through the lens of Morbid Angel with any sort of prejudice, you'll hear it's a pretty good death metal record. I certainly think it's better than the last Deicide album. if we're still on the Deicide Morbid Angel comparison track, but Illa Divinum Insanus, in my view, I think it completely and utterly derailed their career. It devalued the Morbid Angel name. And it does have its moments. Blades for Baal is a decent song. Nevermore is a decent song. And that's more or less it. Everything else is fucking awful. And it's not befitting of a band with a status that Morbid Angel has. Other things that I would potentially suggest to bands not to do, certainly 6 Feet Under, I would have told them, rather than make that second to last record, what was the fucking thing called? Nightmares of the Decomposed, I would have gone, don't go anywhere near that. You've been on a reasonably mediocre track for a while now. You did Graveyard Classics 4, which was fucking awful. But Nightmares of the Decomposed just turned you into a complete and utter joke. So I would have warned them against that. And then maybe with, I've spoken about it before, but maybe with Sepultura, I would have said to Andreas Kisser, Igor, and Paolo, do not continue under the Sepultura name. Start something new, start a new band. You're going to have to tour in the van for a period of time. You're going to have to pay your dues again. You're going to have to rebuild this from the ground up. But in the long run, it will benefit you. So, there you go. Those are my answers to those questions. Let's move on and hear some more music. Mesa have unveiled a new single called The Dress. The Dress is the latest single from Italian doom metal conjurers Mesa. The stunning new track, which includes a trumpet solo by Michele Tedesco, instant red flag, comes off the band's forthcoming new album, The Spin, set for release on April the 11th through Metal Blade Records. The accompanying video clip was directed by Marco Zanen, with some degree of trepidation. Let's hear what it sounds like. Boo! Well, we all knew how that song was going to go. I mean, I'm not even going to wait for the trumpet solo because I can only imagine that's going to be total and utter dog shit. But with this, it's just the same as all of these female-fronted doom metal bands. They all sound the same. They all go the same direction. There's a bit of mellow whilst the woman sings, and then they stomp that distortion pedal, and in we get with a rocky part. I don't know who listens to this fucking crap, and I do not understand why Metal Blade Records would sign it. Actually, I do, but that I guess no. Let me rephrase. I don't understand who listens to it, but clearly someone does, or Metal Blade Records wouldn't sign it. They're in the business of making money. I do not begrudge them that. But it's definitely not something I would listen to, and I would assume that the Legion wouldn't listen to it either. But I've said to you guys before, the way that this works is I'm not cherry picking shit. I'm just going down and grabbing things randomly as they come up. Sometimes we land on something excellent. Sometimes we land on something where we'd sooner take a hammer to the privates than listen to it for very much longer. Here's another one that looks like it may be one of those hammer to the privates type songs. Ocean of Grief, Premier Ghost Inside track. I'm gonna apply some common sense there and probably just give that one a swift pass. We then have Insight, who have just released a video for Just a Rat single. It says here, Arizona-based groove thrashers Insight have released a music video for their brand new single Just a Rat. That was co-directed by Jim Laveau and Tony Aguilera. It's the band's first song in 3 years, and it will appear on the upcoming follow-up to 2022's Wake Up Dead, due out later this year via Reigning Phoenix Music. Vocalist Richie Cavalera on the song Just a Rat is our first single, and it's unique, heavy, and to me, moving metal into a whole new, fresh direction. I love when bands say shit like that. I mean, it's one thing to be confident about the music that you are making or the record you're about to release. I mean, no one's gonna release a PR statement and go, well, we had a couple of ideas and we don't think they quite landed. This album is one that you probably want to give a pass. So no one's going to do that. Everything is always, this is our best album to date. This is our heaviest shit we've ever done. But whenever people say they're moving the entire genre in a fresh direction, or like Satyr said with Deep Calleth Upon Deep, that this is going to be a paradigm shift for black metal or whatever the quote was, I just feel like you're setting yourself up to fail. So, back to Riley Fishhunt's question. If I could give a band any advice, never say shit like this. You are literally setting people up to dislike you. Anyway, Richie goes on to say, I wanted the lyrical content to be very relatable, and God knows we've all dealt with a rat at some point in our lives. So, once again, I'm not feeling immensely confident, but let's give this a spin. 63 seconds is about as much of that deplorable horse poo as I can endure. Fun fact about Richie Cavalera, he is the stepson of a little-known gentleman named Max Cavalera, which I'm sure many of you either already knew or probably put two and two together. As far as pushing metal in a whole new, fresh direction, you need to fucking start listening to some... Get on Spotify and listen to some of the new music coming out before you make bold claims like that, because there is nothing new or fresh about this. I mean, this just sounds like stock standard hardcore-ish metal. You know, if they had not set such a high bar or made such bold claims, maybe you could give it a pass and go, yeah, it's listenable. If somebody played it in the background, I'd be indifferent to it, but I wouldn't scream, shut off that crap. But, you kind of set yourself up for this one. This is a definite thumbs down, total and utter complete fucking dog shit album. Partly because you have told us, you've claimed that you are driving metal into a fresh new direction when you most definitely are not. Right, more questions. Let's grab one from the pile. Scott Bamford a high-ranking member of the Legion, I should add. He asks, having met and spoken to Paige is my wife, and heard your explanation that she is not a fan of metal, but she can appreciate it as an art form when performed well live. What gig of a band or artist that she likes have you been to that you appreciated? Not Tom Jones, already discussed, and he is a legend. I did mention that. Now, I will say, in fairness, the only thing that I have seen with her was Tom Jones, like non-metal band that I've been to see. She's not really somebody who goes to gigs. Also, as much as I love her, taste in music is not something that I necessarily I'm not necessarily gonna gel with, which, you know, kind of makes me love her even more because you know, she certainly feels the same about the music I listen to, but she at least goes to it with an open mind. I would struggle to drag myself across that precipice for her stuff. But what I will say, little known outside of the UK, there's a dude named Dizzy Rascal. It makes kind of UK rap or garage or whatever the fuck you want to call it. He's not great when you hear his recordings, but I was at Bestival in 2010 for a bachelor party, saw him play live, and actually I was reasonably impressed. They kind of approached the show more like an old school hip-hop collective, so you had multiple people on stage rapping and things like that, and there was just a pretty good energy and a good vibe to that whole performance. So that, I would say, is probably one. I know that she likes him, so I'd probably say that's something that I could appreciate. Scott goes on to say, if no answer, what band or artist your wife or daughter likes, would you be willing or curious to go out of interest in their performance? No selection of a female performer for eye candy purposes only. So maybe Melanie Martinez, much as I'm loath to say it, but my daughter is such a massive fan. I know that it'll make her happy if dear old dad joins her for a Melanie Martinez show. So yeah, that would be my answer to that. All right, next up we have got Shimmy to the Blast Beat. She asks, what are your top 5 black metal albums of all time? Incredibly difficult to answer that question without spending a huge amount of time thinking about it and, you know, collating, calibrating, you know, however you want to assess and review it. But off the top of my head, Mayhem, De Mysteries Dom Satanas, Emperor in the Nightside Eclipse, Immortal, Battles in the North, what else? Marduk, Serpent Sermon, and Funeral Mist, Maranatha. I think that would be what I would go with. But, you know, again, that's what pops into my mind first. It is extremely likely that if I were given time to sit down and properly think it through, it would change. Maranatha is absolutely phenomenal. Very close runner-up would be Hate Them by Dark Throne. I think Hate Them is just an absolute masterpiece. I like the trilogy, particularly A Blaze in the Northern Sky, but to me, Hate Them completely and utterly mops the floor with every single thing that Dark Throne did besides that. No matter how much more of an influence the earlier records had versus Hate Them is just a better record, all in all. Okay, we were talking about Neurosis a couple of weeks ago, and I was, as I typically do when it comes to conversation about Neurosis, was raving about how much I love them. Now news reaches us that Steve Von Till has his 7th LP ready for a May release. American neo-folk master Steve Von Till is ready to return with his 7th full-length installment, Alone in a World of Wounds. That comes out on May the 16th, 2025, recorded mostly at his Barnes studio at home in Idaho, and mixed at Circular Ruin in Brooklyn, New York, with producer Randall Dunn. I have enjoyed Steve Von Till's solo output. He always does something a little different, and he always does something that is quite interesting, unique, kind of the way that he approached Neurosis. So the track is called Watch Them Fade. Let's hear what it sounds like.
as long as the river's wide, and I cannot feel my hands. The silence pulls the power from the air, and I cannot clear my head. You often told me that time is full of holes and souls with empty eyes. In days like these, their cryptic static interferes and stands in the way of our dreams. No, I can't and I won't, no, I will not watch them fade. No, I can't and I won't, no, I will not watch them fade away. How many times must we hold out our own skin like a beggar's broken teeth?
So let me say at the outset, if Satan, gore, blasting, and violence is really the only thing you're after in music, I completely understand that you probably don't like what you just heard. If you're a Neurosis fan, though, like me, you're pretty impressed by that. I mean, I would go a step further and say that is a definite top-notch for me as a Neurosis fan. I loved A Deep Voiceless Wilderness, which was the last Steve Until solo record. This one, to me, I'm picking up quite strong Leonard Cohen vibes, particularly in his vocal style. It's interesting with him. He's 55 years old now, and I would make an argument that he sounds better as a singer than he has ever done. As a matter of fact, any fellow Neurosis fans, let me know your thoughts on this, but he certainly sounds the most confident as a singer that I think I've ever heard him. That is really, really good. Phenomenal production. Let's see what Randall Dunn has done previously. Because this is, I'm very curious to see this now. So he's done Earth, Kang, John Schuller, Lesbian, Midday Vale, Boris, Jesse Sykes in The Sweet Year After. He's done Wolves in the Throne Room. So yeah, he's done a couple of things I'm familiar with and a couple of things that I'm not. But in terms of just pure engineering excellence and just giving something a warm, lush, huge sound, that is second to none. So fantastic. Really looking forward to this. You know, there's always a part of me that's going to hope and pray that, pray to the Dark Lord, that Neurosis somehow find a way to do another album, even if it's the final thing that they ever do, just a way to cap off an incredible career. Scott Kelly has come out in public and he is, he's at least admitted to what he did. I don't know the details of what he did. Certainly the way he described it, it sounded absolutely horrible. But at the same time, the question is, at what point do at what point does a man like this earn vindication? If you've admitted what you've done, and in your personal life you've taken steps to ensure that you don't make the same mistakes, do you have to put a shotgun in your mouth before people believe that you're truly sorry? So that's kind of a whole different train of conversation. But what I do hope is that at some point Neurosis find a way to at least make one final record and close the chapter, close the book on, in my view, one of the greatest bands in the history of music. Like, not even just across metal, in the history of music, there is no question. They have never put out a bad record. They've put out some of the greatest albums and songs in the history of heavy music. And this, to me, just feels like a nice way to, for Steve to be producing stuff and releasing artistic output while hopefully we wait for that day to come that a new Neurosis album drops on us unexpectedly. So, anyway, good stuff there by Steve Until. Let's move on. Crematory have got a new video out. Not going to watch that. Not even if you pay me. Paradise Lost are in the studio recording new music. We've speculated on this, but it says here, Paradise Lost haven't released an album since Obsidian in 2020. That doesn't mean that its members have been idle. Vocalist Nick Holmes has kept busy with Bloodbath and his other band Host, while guitarist Gregor McIntosh has been involved with Host. In addition, he released both an album and an EP with his project Strigoi, which incidentally features Paradise Lost's new drummer Guido Zima. Now, 5 years later, the focus is back on Paradise Lost. In a recent interview with Chile's Power Metal, the band revealed that the band's next album is nearly finished and expected to drop in September or October. September or October, typically when they tend to release their stuff, unless I'm sorely mistaken. I think, if memory serves me correctly, that Obsidian came out around that time, and generally speaking, most of their albums are released around that time of year. Actually, no, I'm wrong. Obsidian came out on May 15th, 2020. But yeah, anyway, forget about that. That's really pretty immaterial. I am looking forward to it, though, very much so. And I'm very, very curious to see the direction that they take after Obsidian. Again, like I've said this many times before, Obsidian to me felt like the first album where they forced themselves to do certain things that I don't necessarily think that they were comfortable doing, or at the very least inspired to do. And I think having done the Icon 30th anniversary celebrations, and kind of gotten back into that old style, gotten some more Host material out of their system, I am very, very curious to see what they do next. If I had to make a prediction, I'm going to say they're going back to Draconian Times, Icon era, Paradise Lost. And I'm certainly here for it. Again, my view, that band has never done a bad album, even when they are not at their best. And I would argue Obsidian and Believe in Nothing are Paradise Lost not at their best. Even those albums have their moments, or certainly worth listening to. Okay, let's move on now to Benediction. They've premiered a new single and music video. It says, Benediction have launched an official video for their newest single, Crawling Over Corpses. The latter serves as another preview of their upcoming full-length effort, Ravage of Empires, due out in April on Nuclear Blast Records. The video clip was directed, produced, and edited by Martin Golterman. Previous song was decent, passable. Wasn't quite blown away by it, but let's hear what Crawling Over Corpses sounds like. So they are presenting us here with nothing that we haven't heard before. I mean, if you're familiar with Subconscious Terror, The Grand Leveler, Transcend the Rubicon, I'd argue you've heard this song probably in different shapes and guises on those albums. But that being said, I do like it. I mean, you know, I hammer a lot on deathcore and on some of the more modern death metal bands on the news rant. And the reality is, for every fucking deathcore band, Benediction, you know, that tries to sound super heavy and super intense and super aggressive, Benediction have with a song that sounds pretty derivative of everything else that they've done, still managed to sound more convincing, still managed to sound more badass, and still managed to sound more aggressive. So, you know, again, as much as if you wanted to be a snide critic and go, well, some of these riffs sound a little recycled, you could do that probably quite easily. But, you know, does that really matter when the song is this enjoyable and this entertaining? And again, you know, when what they have done, even at their age, I mean, like Dave Ingram now is 56 years old. So in their mid-50s, they have turned out a better, heavier, more convincing track than certainly fucking Pale-Face Swiss or some of the other deathcore crap that we have listened to on the news rant. And got to give it to him as well, I think Dave Ingram sounds fantastic. I mean, for his age, phenomenal. I would argue he sounds better than he sounded on, I think he was on Scriptures. Yes, he was. He definitely sounds better than on there. I'd argue he maybe sounds a little bit better than he did on The Dreams You Dread and Grindbastard. Like, there's a little, an additional bit of raspiness to his voice. Don't know if the man smokes, but maybe it's the old Camel non-filtered giving him that rasp. Regardless, I just think he sounds cool. And I think the song is very entertaining. So thumbs up from me, without a doubt. Okay. We're going to do a couple more, but before we do, let's grab us another question. Next up on the questions list, we've got Mr. Goatsy. He asks, what is your current workout routine? Focus on which lifts? So my workout routine right now is pretty basic, pretty straightforward. I try and do weights 4 times a week. And it's a standard shoulders, then back, shoulders, legs, chest, and then back split. So, and then I try, if I have the time, to do a separate day dedicated to arms, but my job at the moment means that I rarely get the chance to do that. And then in terms of kind of the compound lifts, the classic lifts, I try and incorporate deadlifts into my back workout. Definitely squats, like barbell squats, are a must for me in my leg workout. I used to I used to build my chest workout around the bench press as kind of my primary lift, and then everything else being accessories. But I must be honest with you, I actually find the bench press to be not nearly as effective as a flat or incline dumbbell bench press. There's a number of different things that you can do that I think are more effective than a bench press. So, yeah, so that's basically the gist of it. I try and get in at least a day's worth of cardio, or at least one day that I dedicate to cardio, but I also do at least 20 to 30 minutes cardio with every weight workout that I do. So whether that's like 15 minutes on the cross trainer before I get started, and then 15 minutes later, I always try and do that. This year, though, it's been a bit of a pain keeping consistent, because I've had, just various things crop up at work. I've needed to travel. I've needed to do stuff. But, the next few weeks should be a little bit more straightforward and a little bit more plain sailing. So I'll be back on it properly. I also use, in case anybody wants to know, I use something called Fit Notes to track my workouts. And then I also use something called Macro Factor to track my macros. Sometimes, as has been the case in the last week, I tend to ignore Macro Factor because the macros of ice cream and all of the other finer things in life, they don't track so well. Right, we got a question in from Drugoth as well, the mighty Drugoth. Shog versus the Sinister Minister, fight to the death. Who you got? So Shograth, total badass, but I got to go with the Inner Circle, and the Sinister Minister, Karl Hykara, he's part of the Inner Circle. Also, I know he'll fight dirty. Biting, groin stuff, whatever it takes to win. So I give the edge to the Sinister Minister, but that is not taking away from the fact that Shograth is hard as they come. All right, Let's see what we've got next. Blood Abscission have posted a new song. It says here, a month in advance of their second full-length release, 2, black metal operatives Blood Abscission offer in listening the second new track in preview entitled 2-1. Let's hear what it sounds like. It sounds interesting, but one thing that I will comment on vis-a-vis atmospheric black metal, I find an awful lot of it to be music for people that are skulking around on RABM Reddits and don't want to listen to fucking man's black metal like Horner, Akhlys, Darvaza, and fucking proper black metal. That's just, to me, I spoke to Cheyenne about this as well. We're both in agreement. You can see it at shows. It always seems to be that subgenre of black metal that attracts the more sensitive types and the folks that I'm not friends with. That being said, this sounds like it's got promise. It is a 12-minute song, so we're not exactly going to be able to form a well-rounded opinion of it by listening to 2.5 minutes. What I did like was the melody, especially right before the vocals kick in. The vocals were a bit of a damp squib on things, though. They kind of felt like they just fade in from nowhere, and they don't really seem to have much of a place there. I don't like vocals that are not treated like an additional instrument. Like, vocals need to be there to enhance the intensity, or at least enhance the atmosphere of a band. And what I find, again, with a lot of atmospheric black metal bands, is very often it's just kind of, it feels like screaming for the sake of it. If you think about Spellgoth on the last Horner album, it sounds fucking badass, and, there's like real intent behind the vocals. It performs in many ways the same function as death metal does, where it's that additional instrument, it just adds that additional layer of intensity. If you think of Mortis on, one of my favorite black metal albums ever, Maranatha, every single song without those vocals just wouldn't be the same. It amps up the aggression, it amps up the hatred, and it amps up all of the good things that you look for in a black metal song. Whereas here, if the vocals weren't there, honestly, I think depending on the quality of your headphones, you probably might not even have noticed it. So that to me is a miss. The other thing that I would say is this photo of whatever the fuck they've got on the album cover. It kind of feels a little bit meh. It feels like it doesn't have any. There's no imagination there. There's no real creativity used. It's kind of like those paintings that you see where I saw one on Facebook the other day where a guy, sticks a bunch of holes in a fucking can of paint and then he spins it over a canvas. It might look interesting and okay when he's done, but that's not art. So this isn't an album cover. This isn't cover art, in my opinion. I can go outside and take a photo, and it's the fucking same thing. I want bands to put a bit more effort into it. Interesting fact: Blood Abscission is a Deborah Morty Productions band. So based on that, and the fact that they, generally speaking, have some pretty good quality control over at Deborah Morty HQ. I mean, I'm not going to write them off completely. But they got some way to go to thoroughly convince me that this is going to be an album that I'm gonna want to come back to and listen to properly. Okay, Ominous Ruin drop Seeds of Entropy. San Francisco, California-based tech death metalers Ominous Ruin are unveiling the Seeds of Entropy single. It serves as a first taste of their sophomore record, Requiem, which will land in stores on May the 9th, 2025 through Willowtip Records. Let's give it a whirl. Okay, absolutely no question that Ominous Ruin really know their way around their instruments. The drums by Harley Blandford, fantastic. And Crystal Rose, the vocalist, is very, very good as well. That being said, I am completely and utterly indifferent to this style of death metal. There's nothing here there's nothing that's grabbing me. I mean, we've listened to other bands recently in this style that have done something a little bit more compelling. This is just not working for me. Again, I'm sure there's tons of people. I see many of them on metal Twitter that are going to cream their little shorts over this, but it would take death metal. It's got a very, very low hit rate with me. It's also, though, a nice segue into the next question that I wanted to answer. Kelu666 asks, are there any bands or albums you enjoy in a metal subgenre you normally don't like? Yes. I like all of the Despised Icon albums, and I normally don't like deathcore. I think Despised Icon are a fucking excellent band. I think in terms of the best or the choice selection by Despised Icon that I would think is worth you checking out, The Ills of Modern Man is excellent, The Healing Process is fucking brilliant, and Day of Mourning I think is also top notch. So those are records you should check out whether you are into deathcore or not. Any others that come to mind? I shall reveal, perhaps as a bit of a I was going to say a dirty secret, but fuck, it's not a secret, and it's not. I don't feel guilty about any of my pleasures, but I will confess, I don't really care for new metal, but I do like me some Dark Days by Cold Chamber, and of course you guys know that Wisconsin Death Trip by Static X. I can't get enough of that. That's fucking brilliant. But again, new metal as a whole, not my bag. But those things, I would say, those two records, pretty decent. There's a new single and video out by Behemoth. I think we made the decision last time that they are not worth listening to any longer, so we're going to give that one a miss. We also then have Fallujah, who are releasing Cenotaph in June, their new album. It says, yeah, on June the 13th, 2025, US progressive death metal formation Fallujah will put out their 6th full-length installment entitled Cenotaph. Alongside disclosed details, check out also an official video for the first single, Kaleidoscopic Waves. Commenting on the impending record release, vocalist Kyle Schaefer states, we are excited to finally reveal Fallujah's new album Cenotaph, marking the 6th chapter in our discography. This is our most ambitious record yet. I get nervous when people say that sort of thing, especially when it comes to technical death metal, because you know Rivers of Nile did that back when they were still worth a damn, and we know what they ended up sounding like. But anyway, and it's certainly the band's most technical, dynamic, and progressive material to date. The music carried out by these 8 tracks is matched by an equally ambitious concept, a lyrical story that traverses unfolding layers of time and reality in an otherworldly post-death realm of existence. Cenotaph is also our most collaborative album, he says. Now, again, some of you guys will remember that I had Scott of Fallujah on the podcast back when Empyrean came out, so this would have been 2022. Scott Carstairs, fucking great guy. He actually, I liked him so much as a guest that he made me enjoy Fallujah even more. But I did like Empyrean, and unlike Rivers of Nile, this band actually still has consistently released good stuff up until this point. So let's hear what Kaleidoscopic Waves sounds like. Right. Again, not my tempo. Scott Carstairs, you're a top-notch dude, but sadly, this is not my vibe. I know there's a lot of people that are going to disagree, and a lot of people that will love this. For this style of music, it's done extremely well. I just don't like this style of music. Metal, to me, has to be threatening. It has to be badass. It has to be aggressive. There must be something about it that is edgy, that, you know, is something that your parents will find completely and utterly objectionable. So, you know, and this is the kind of thing I could honestly play my mom. I could play it to my mom and she would go, you know, yeah, I don't like the vocals, but, you know, I think that they play their instruments really well, or whatever the case may be. Could not play her the first Deicide record and say, hey, Mom, what do you think of Mephistopheles or Carnage in the Temple of the Damned? So, yeah, not my thing. All right, we're going to finish up on the Democrats' Guide to Rock Music. It's been a while since we've traversed the pages of Blabbermouth, or as it at one point at the very least was known, what has Ted Nugent done today? The first headline on year reads, the first headline year that is grabbing my attention reads, Glenn Danzig rules out new Danzig and Misfits albums. Bit of a bummer, I think. Says standalone singles are a possibility. He was interviewed by 98 Rock radio station, a DJ named Abe Keenan. There is audio of it here, so let's listen to a bit of that.
Do you ever see a new Misfits album coming out, or a new song?
Maybe a song, not an album.
How about a new Danzig album? Is that in the works?
No.
Oh, so you're just...
No, look, people now just want to download your stuff for free, and they don't understand that it costs money to go in a studio and record a record. So it's not really a great business model to go and record a record and then not be able to recoup your money that you spent making the record.
Yeah.
So, with the Danzig, it might be like the Misfits. Maybe I'll record a song or two and just release it, and it won't cost that much.
It's kind of like how Elvis used to put out singles. I mean, you did that whole Elvis album, which was awesome. Maybe you guys could just do that. One song from Danzig and one from the Misfits.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the beginning, the Misfits only released singles. We couldn't afford to put out an album.
Yeah.
But a lot of the punk bands, that's how it was. You couldn't afford to do an album, especially if you were underground, you weren't on a big label. You could only afford to do a single. So maybe I'll do that. For Danzig, and maybe we'll do it for the Misfits. We'll see.
We spoke about, obviously, the changes to the music industry model last week, and I shared various ramblings about that. I can definitely understand where Glenn is coming from at the age of 69, which is fucking mind-blowing to think. I mean, the dude is, number one, he's 3-4 years away from my dad. Secondly, at 70, the bloke's a grandpa, and he's still on stage belting out those Danzig songs and belting out those Misfit songs and sounding like an absolute badass doing it. I can definitely see why he, isn't in the mood to have to do any touring and put up with the schlep and the fucking drama that comes with that. I mean, that's a young man's game. And then I can understand why he doesn't have any interest in putting out new music either. Again, having to go through the whole process of the PR cycle that comes with it, being in the studio, dealing with everything to do with that. It's just not at his age, at this point of his career, he has nothing left to prove. I don't even know whether he has any ideas left to give to the world, really. My apologies, by the way, if you heard whining in the background, that's the dog. She's got this weird thing where she doesn't like closed doors in the house, so she'll keep fucking scratching at the door till I let her in. Then she comes in, and then she doesn't want to go back out again. So it can wear on old Smith's patience as much as I love her. By the way, something that I need to share with you guys, it is unlikely that I'm going to be attending Inferno this year. The reason for that is, quite simply, I have not been able to get an appointment with the Norwegian embassy to get my Schengen visa extended for this year. The previous one that I had expired in September. And so I've kind of taken that as a cue, a sign from beyond, to Mother Earth talking to me, and I'm finally going to get my British passport, my British citizenship sorted out. I am hoping to get that done in time for Beyond the Gates. That's the goal. Frankly speaking, I would prefer to go to Beyond the Gates if I had to choose between the two, because I've not been to Beyond the Gates yet. And also, my man Swartalv and Gehenna are going to be performing. I do not want to miss that for anything in the world. So I'm going to have either a visa or a passport to be able to go to that. But, I'd say the chances of me being able to attend Inferno are about 20% right now. If somebody comes out of the woodwork in the next day or two and says, "Hey, Jackie, we've been able to find you a slot at VFS Global," which is the company that administers all the visas here in London, great. I've paid for an agency to do that for me, but they've not been able to secure anything either. So, if that happens, maybe I'll still go, but in all likelihood, I won't be there. I was also thinking about it. Yes, I could get a lot of face-to-face interviews there, but I'm not as excited about the Inferno lineup as I am about the Beyond the Gates lineup. Both are going to be cool. Bythos I would definitely have wanted to see at Inferno, but Beyond the Gates has a lot more that I'm interested in seeing. So, and things like 1349, I'll be able to catch them at Fortress. So there you go. Just to give you guys an update, I'm sure there's going to be a cataclysmic rise in the number of people demanding a refund from Inferno because old Jackson from Into the Necrosphere won't be there. But just thought I would let the one or two of you who are looking forward to seeing me there know what's happening. Another bit of news. Mastodon has recruited YouTuber Ben Eller for their Tool Live in the Sand festival performance. Over the weekend, it was announced that Brent Hines has left Mastodon after 25 years. Apparently, he hates metal and had no interest in being in Mastodon anymore. Quite honestly, and I'm not going to dwell on this for very long, I mean, aside from saying congratulations to Ben Eller, because, I mean, the bloke is a YouTuber, apparently a massive fan of Mastodon. This must be a dream come true for him. So congratulations to him. Hopefully he injects some fresh life into the band, because Hushed and Grim was one of the most atrocious albums that any band of that caliber could possibly have released. This comes from somebody who really has loved every single thing that Mastodon has done. I was a fan of theirs all the way going back to Life's Blood and Remission. I remember when those albums came out and how much I loved them. I've spoken many times before about seeing them at the Underworld in Camden, to a house of about, maybe a quarter full. And I've liked everything that they've done. I was on board for The Hunter. I was on board for Once More Around the Sun. I've always liked the fact that they did different things. But Hushed and Grim to me sounded like a band who had just completely lost interest in their own art. And so if I think about it through that lens, then I'm not surprised that Brent has left. Brent is a very funny guy, but I know he also has some issues, some internal issues that he needs to take care of, specifically drug and alcohol related. Hopefully he finds the help that he needs for that. But like I said, congratulations to Ben. Whatever the outcome of this is, you've managed to do what probably, thousands of kids dream of being able to do. And I saw some video footage of him on stage with Mastodon as well at that festival, and he looked like he absolutely fucking nailed it. Right, final news story, and then we're going to wrap up. I thought this was hysterical. You can be Gene Simmons' roadie for a day for the cool price of $12,495. So it says here, Kissed bassist and vocalist Gene Simmons is offering his fans a chance to be his roadie for a day during the upcoming tour with the Gene Simmons Band. Simmons' $12,495 personal assistant and band roadie for the day experience is limited to one per show and includes the following perks. You will meet up with Gene and the Gene Simmons Band members early in the day, either at his hotel or a designated location to go over the band's show day schedule. You will be on the Gene Simmons Band team crew for the entire day. You will get a Gene Simmons Band crew member shirt and hat. You will get a Gene Simmons Band crew member VIP laminate. You will have a meal with Gene Simmons at the hotel or backstage at the show. You will arrive and load into the venue with a band. You will help the band set up for the show. You will hang out backstage. You will sit in on the sound check. Gene Simmons will bring you on stage during the show and introduce you. You will get a set list signed by Gene Simmons. You can take your photos throughout your entire experience. You may bring one guest. You may bring 4 items for Gene to sign. And you get a Gene Simmons bass signed by Gene Simmons. Well, at least you get a few things in exchange, and it's not just slave labor that you're paying for, the privilege of doing. But yeah, $12,495 is fucking steep. Anyone who follows me on my personal socials know that I tend to have nice lavish vacations. I don't think I spent that much on my last vacation, and that vacation lasted 2 weeks. So, yeah, old Gene is pulling a bit of a fast one, though I'm sure there are plenty of gullible saps that are going to pay it. So, knowing that the Legion on gullible saps, I will offer you the opportunity to be my personal assistant for a day, and it's only going to cost you $500. In exchange, you get an Into the Necrosphere t-shirt and this half-drunken bottle of water. All right, my friends, on that note, I'm going to wrap things up. I've spoken about the song that I'm going to play us out with, probably the band more so than the song, many, many times. If you don't know the album Cross the Six by Sinister, you really do need to fucking brush up on your your death metal fundamentals. It is one of the greatest death metal albums alongside its successor, Diabolical Summoning, ever to be released. Came out on Nuclear Blast back in, I think it was 1993. We're going to play a track called Compulsory Resignation. Remember, of course, I am back next week with John Jarvis of Scour. Until then, whatever it is that you are doing and wherever it is that you are, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you bad motherfuckers again next week.